Do you know about the Yin Dragon Coiling Peak? My ancestors' clan hall, an ancient building, stood firm through countless wars and storms. Because of it, our family prospered with generations of descendants. Every few decades, the relatives would renovate the hall, choosing a virgin girl from the clan to receive the main ridge beam. This time, it was my turn. But the village children kept chanting. Bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed, Yin Dragon coils above, granaries full. Daughters of the clan, for generations, will be offered and bowed to. The 100-year-old ancestral hall of our family, after enduring so many storms, now needed repairs. According to clan rules, when installing the main ridge beam, a virgin girl from the family must stand beneath it to support it. That's why my mother called to ask if I was still a virgin. The moment I heard the phone, I was stunned. In this day and age, who would ask such a direct question? But installing the beam was traditionally the men's task. Why force a virgin girl to bear it? I suspected my mother was using this as an excuse to pry into my private life. I initially planned to make up an excuse, but my father insisted I come home. He said installing the beam was a major event, and no suitable girl could be found in the family. I was the only option. If I dared to lie to him, he would disown me. My father valued the clan above all else, even spending a huge sum to renovate the ancestral hall, though he usually hesitated even to buy a bottle of beer. With his voice so firm, I reluctantly blushed and agreed to return to the village. As soon as I got home, my parents said they wanted to take me to the ancestral hall to test my cinnabar mark to confirm if I was still a virgin. This frightened me so much I almost ran away on the spot. The cinnabar mark test sounded unreliable. What if it didn't appear? Wouldn't I die of shame? But my father grabbed my ponytail tightly and dragged me straight to the ancestral hall. When we arrived, many people were busy. Some aunts and uncles from the clan looked around, tapping walls and digging at bricks. This ancestral hall had stood for centuries, repaired every 180 years, and was very well preserved. It was said that when the hall was first built, the clan flourished and many people prospered. There was a rumor that the ancestors had hidden countless treasures within this hall. These women claimed to be helping, but in reality, they wanted to find the treasure. As soon as they saw my parents pulling me in, they immediately understood I was there for the cinnabar mark test to confirm my chastity. Everyone smirked knowingly. Someone said, "Look at how tightly her legs are pressed together, she must still be pure." Another remarked, "Over 20 and still keeping it. Is there something wrong with her?" My face burned. Just then, my father went inside to inquire, saying that to perform the cinnabar mark test, they first needed to catch the gecko. He told me to wait and take the opportunity to admire the 100-year-old ancestral hall. I couldn't stand the gossiping aunts and uncles, so I quietly walked around the ancestral hall. As I reached the back courtyard, I saw a group of children gathered, giggling. Curious, I approached and happened to see a child about 3 or 4 years old holding a snake as thick as an arm, playing with it like a rope, laughing heartily. The other children didn't dare touch it. Some poked it with sticks, others hit it hard with plastic toys. But this snake was strange. It was clearly alive but didn't try to escape. It even kept its mouth tightly shut, not daring to bite anyone. When I was little, my grandmother once told me that some spirits, before gaining full power, had to endure a trial by children. That's why people often saw children catching snakes and scorpions, killing these highly venomous creatures. No matter how much the children teased them, they wouldn't bite back because it was their trial. If they passed this ordeal, they could become spirits or immortals. If they failed and were tormented to death by children, it meant their fate wasn't strong enough. Seeing the child tying the snake in knots and about to whip it to the ground, I felt a little pity. I quickly cleared my throat and said sternly, "Didn't your parents tell you not to hit the snakes of the house, especially not the snakes in this ancestral hall? This is a guardian young dragon for our family. If your parents find out you've killed a guardian serpent, just wait for a beating." The children were mischievous but also feared adults. With the ancestral hall being renovated recently, these taboos had been mentioned frequently. The child holding the snake let out a startled, "Ah!" then unexpectedly swung the snake towards me. I saw the snake writhing in midair and was terrified. Fortunately, it only landed at my feet, otherwise I surely would have fainted. I yelled at the children, who stuck out their tongues and made faces at me, then ran off. I looked at the dying snake on the ground, my legs feeling weak. But if it fell into the children's hands again, it would surely be tormented to death or cooked into soup. I picked up a branch, muttered to it not to bite me, then lifted it and threw it straight over the wall into the rice fields outside. After that, I ran away in a fright, not daring to look back. The back courtyard had snakes, so I didn't dare stay, but the front was filled with aunts and uncles discussing my virginity. I decided to sit by the old well and scroll through my phone. After a few pages, a deep male voice suddenly spoke beside me. "Don't get the cinnabar mark, don't receive the beam. If there's no other way, eat plenty of egg yolks." I froze, the voice was very pleasant to hear. Suspicious, I turned my head. Before me was a young man in ancient traditional clothing, dirty and disheveled, but with bright, piercing eyes fixed on me. He emphasized again, "Absolutely do not receive the beam." I was stunned. He clearly wasn't a member of the clan. Was he a blogger here to film a cosplay transformation video? I was about to ask why I couldn't receive the beam when my mother stood in front, calling, "Luna, hurry up, it's done." I reluctantly replied, but when I turned back, the man was gone. As I followed my parents into the ancestral hall, the village chief and several clan elders sat around a table. On the table was a porcelain jar. The elders looked me up and down, then flipped through thick genealogy books to find my birth chart. The clan elder, sitting in the middle, counted on his fingers repeatedly, took notes, and discussed something with them. The village chief awkwardly cleared his throat, looking at my parents for confirmation once more. "Is she still a maiden?" He said this matter concerned the feng shui and fate of the ancestral hall and the entire lineage. I was so embarrassed I wanted to disappear into the ground, but my parents firmly affirmed that I was. They said I had been a bookworm since childhood and knew nothing of dating. Then first, the cinnabar mark test. Reconfirm tomorrow morning. If it's correct, then let her receive the beam. The village chief lightly tapped the jar on the table, then opened the lid. Inside was a gecko, but it didn't look like an ordinary gecko. It resembled the legendary cinnabar gecko. I never expected our clan to actually have such a thing. Then I heard a dull thud. The clan elder threw the gecko into a stone mortar and pounded it twice, immediately crushing it into two squishy pieces of flesh. A small tail segment still lay outside the mortar, writhing in agony. This sight made my heart pound, and I instinctively wanted to refuse, but my mother held me tightly, and my father glared, implying that if I dared to resist, he would beat me to death when we got home. The clan elder added something else to the mortar, finally using a grass stem to draw out a bit of liquid, then gestured for me to step forward. My mother immediately pulled me, pressing my arm onto the table. The gecko's blood and flesh, mixed with cinnabar and other substances, was a dark red, even darker than in TV dramas. When it was dripped onto the inside of my arm, the liquid was as cold as a piece of ice, but in a flash, it soaked into my skin, leaving a red streak as if burned, a cold that went deep into my bones, making me incredibly uncomfortable. The clan elder glanced at it, and his grim face finally broke into a smile. He turned to my father and said, "Then she will receive the beam tomorrow morning." He added, "Luna must purify her mind and body for 7 days before installing the beam. The hall's repair work will be handled by your family and Ethan." Leaving the ancestral hall, I learned that the clan elder had decided that the family providing a pure girl to receive the beam would get the ancestral hall renovation contract. Everyone knew repairing the ancestral hall was a lucrative opportunity, but I hadn't expected my father, knowing I didn't want to, would still force me to return, hiding everything from me. I asked him if receiving the beam would have any impact, such as affecting my fate or requiring me to keep the cinnabar mark on my arm for life. If not, why bother with birth charts and cinnabar marks and offer such a huge benefit? Could it really be that simple? But after only a few questions, my father became angry, saying that even if I married later, I still had to contribute to the Shen family, and it was just receiving the beam to support the roof, yet I wouldn't do it. He accused me of being too educated, looking down on clan customs and only thinking of myself. He said my brother, Ethan, was poor and incompetent, looked down upon by the villagers, and I didn't intend to help him. Now, repairing the ancestral hall would bring money and prestige, even more than I could achieve. That night, the whole family argued, and it was far from pleasant. My mother was so angry she didn't even bother to cook, just boiled some noodles for us, then scolded me, saying I didn't understand the family's difficulties and wouldn't even offer a little help. I just felt that returning home this time, nothing I did was satisfactory. I suffered, but no one appreciated it. After a quick wash, I still had to make my own bed. Drifting in and out of sleep, I felt something cold beside me. I turned my head and saw a snake as thick as my thumb coiled beside my pillow. It swayed its head, its snake eyes staring intensely at me. I was so scared my entire body went cold and my hair stood on end. The snake slightly raised its head, flicked its tongue, and hissed, "Do not receive the beam. If you've already received the cinnabar mark, you must eat egg yolks. Eat egg yolks." Saying this, it opened its mouth and lunged straight at me. I shrieked and shot up like a fish flailing its tail, only to realize I had just experienced a dream. There was no snake beside my pillow, yet the words, "eat egg yolks," echoed in my mind. I remembered the man I met by the well earlier that day. He had said the same thing. Too scared to sleep, I went online to research egg yolks. But searching back and forth, I found no reason for it. I only knew that people who worked out usually ate only egg whites, not yolks. I vaguely drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up and decided to boil 2 eggs, eating the yolks just to be safe, because I had a feeling this dream wasn't a coincidence. But before the eggs were even cooked, my parents dragged me to the ancestral hall for another cinnabar mark check. On the way, as we passed the village chief's house, I saw his granddaughter, May, who had just finished her college entrance exams, arguing with her mother while holding a bowl full of egg yolks. "Why do you keep making me eat egg yolks? They're so hard to swallow." Hearing the words, egg yolks, I immediately remembered that strange dream and turned my head. I saw the village chief scolding the girl, telling her to just eat. "We feed and clothe you, and you still complain so much." Seeing us pass by, he glared at May again, then offered a forced smile to us. My mother subtly pulled me closer and whispered, "Receiving the beam requires 2 people. May's birth chart also fits. If she still has her cinnabar mark, she'll receive the beam with you. Then, the ancestral hall repair work will go to the village chief's family, but the embankment repair in the village, though difficult, also earns money." But in my mind, I only had the words, egg yolks, and I felt there was something very strange about the village chief's attitude. When we reached the front courtyard of the ancestral hall, the children who had played with the snake yesterday were frolicking again, running and singing. Bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed, Yin Dragon coils above, granaries full. Daughters of the clan, for generations, will be offered and bowed to. Just as the children were singing, the man in ancient attire I had met yesterday appeared subtly in a corner of the ancestral hall, shaking his head slightly, signaling me not to enter. There were several words in the children's rhyme that clearly alluded to the construction of the ridge beam. Combined with the attitude of the village chief and the clan elders, I felt something was amiss. I was about to chase after the man to ask him, but just then, the village chief's angry shout rang out from behind. "What nonsense are you singing, running, and making noise in the ancestral hall? I'll tell your parents to give you a good beating." The children were so scared they fell silent, not daring to utter a sound, and immediately ran away. As soon as the shout ended, the man also vanished. The village chief, with May trailing behind him, his face grim, instructed several villagers to remember which families had children singing those absurd songs. At the end of the year, when the money from the sand quarry is distributed, those children's share will be cut in half. In recent years, besides revenue from the stone quarry, the biggest source of income for the village was the sand quarry. The village chief was truly angry this time, but was it necessary to get so upset just because some children sang a rhyme? Or had the song touched on something unspoken? A moment later, the clan elder and other elders arrived. It was then I learned that this time, 4 girls had been chosen based on their birth charts and had received the cinnabar mark. Besides me and the village chief's granddaughter, May, there was the clan elder's 17-year-old granddaughter, Lana, and a girl over 20 named Ruby. The cinnabar mark test was quite simple. Just present your hand and use a hot towel soaked in medicated wine to dab the marked spot. The heat from the wine helped blood circulation. If one was no longer pure, the cinnabar mark would fade or disappear. I had researched online and knew that the cinnabar mark was placed on a meridian point on the arm. When a man and woman became intimate, the flow of vital energy would make it disappear. Of course, it could also be stimulated by sex hormones, causing the cinnabar mark to dissolve over time. But strangely, for me and Ruby, both over 20, after applying the hot towel, our cinnabar marks remained intact. In contrast, for the 2 younger girls, 17 and 18-year-old May and Lana, their cinnabar marks had disappeared. May couldn't believe it and vigorously rubbed the spot. How did it disappear just after one application? It was clearly here just now. I really didn't. This was about a girl's honor. She was young, ashamed, and angry, trying to explain, but her voice trembled so much she couldn't form words. The village chief slammed his hand on the table, scolding furiously. "What else do you want? Haven't you shamed us enough? Look at yourself, how old are you already, and you're like this?" Lana also tried to argue but was silenced by a glare from the clan elder, only able to sob, I didn't. The parents of both girls were also present. This affected their daughter's honor. How could they let them continue to lose face before so many people? So, they immediately dragged their daughters home, surely intending to interrogate them about the man involved. My parents and Ruby's parents offered condolences to the village chief and clan elder, saying that girls matured early these days and students dating young was normal. But on their faces, they couldn't hide their joy. After the beam receivers were determined, the ritual began. I thought receiving the beam simply meant taking the old ridge beam and replacing it with a new one. But it was nothing like that. I didn't see any new beam at all. The village chief only explained that installing the beam was a major event. Ruby and I needed to purify ourselves for 7 days, then choose an auspicious day for the ceremony. When he said installing the beam, his eyes twitched slightly, and he glanced at the clan elder, then quickly urged us to begin receiving the beam. Both ends of the old beam were supported by round logs, and the outside was specially wrapped in red cloth covered with charms. A group of young, strong men were already waiting. They slowly lowered the beam with ropes. Ruby and I stood underneath, supporting the beam on our shoulders, then carried it out. This beam was as thick as a person's embrace, and I didn't know how old it was, but it wasn't as heavy as I expected on my shoulders. However, it had a very strange smell, a mix of pine resin and something decomposing, subtly acrid and extremely unpleasant. Moreover, it was cold to the bone, as if it wasn't wood but a frozen iron bar. As the beam was placed on Ruby's and my shoulders, the spot with the cinnabar mark suddenly stung, feeling like icy needles piercing my skin. As I gripped the beam tightly, rustling sounds suddenly came from within the red cloth. Several small geckos crawled out, making Ruby and me jump, almost shrieking. But just then, the village chief and clan elder sternly shouted. Coupled with the weight of the beam pressing down, we dared not move much. Even so, we couldn't endure it for long. Worried, not knowing where we were supposed to carry this beam, I quickly asked them. I thought we just needed to carry it to the front gate of the ancestral hall and set it down, but unexpectedly, the clan elder took a ceremonial mallet and led the way. The village chief signaled us to keep carrying it. This beam, though not overly heavy, was quite large. Ruby and I carried it together, feeling utterly exhausted. I clenched my hands, holding the beam tightly, afraid it would fall. When I gripped the beam, my fingers touched the red cloth and discovered something seemed to be nailed inside. An old saying goes, "Sell the house but not the beam." This is because old ridge beams were often hollowed out by ancestors to hide treasures. I wondered if the village chief had deliberately lowered the beam to retrieve treasures from within. I wasn't the only one with this thought. Ruby, who was helping me carry the beam, was also very bold. Her hands constantly fumbled over the red cloth, making rustling sounds, and occasionally lizards would crawl out from inside. Some lizards even crawled onto me, giving me goosebumps. These lizards were very strange. They had a red dot on their forehead like cinnabar. Ruby's father, Victor, stood in the crowd, continuously winking at her. Onlookers also chuckled, asking the village chief, "Is there treasure hidden in the beam? If it's been taken down, why not open it and see? After all, it belongs to the whole clan." But the village chief immediately shouted, "Aren't the quarry and sand mine dividends enough to feed you? Only eyeing ancestral relics. Anyone who dares to touch the beam or hall will be driven from the clan and won't get a single penny of the dividends." As soon as he uttered this, the entire crowd fell silent. The village chief then glared at Ruby, muttering while burning Joss paper. "Lizard guardian, gecko preserves the clan, virgin receives the beam, Yin Dragon exchanges." This saying was very strange, especially as it seemed to align with the children's rhyme from the morning. But Ruby and I were exhausted from supporting the beam then, daring not to think much, only knowing to continue following them. Finally, we reached the old well, where the clan elder and others were waiting. They opened the stone lid of the well and gestured for us to throw the beam down. By then, the beam had pressed so hard on my legs that they were numb. Hearing we could put it down, Ruby and I complied. As the beam slipped from our hands, the red cloth was torn by the well's edge. It was then I clearly saw the beam wasn't a solid log, but would split in half and then join together. something like wax oozed from the seams. Strange talismans were carved on the heads of the nails driven into the beam. The children's rhyme from the morning suddenly echoed in my mind. Bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed. Could there truly be a corpse inside this beam? The thought flashed, and I quickly shook my head. The beam, though large, was only as wide as an embrace. How could a corpse fit? Moreover, this was the main beam of the ancestral hall. Every year, the entire clan performed rituals there. Who would want to stand beneath a corpse? Too unlucky, yet just that thought sent shivers down my spine. Added to the numbing pain in the spot where the cinnabar mark was, as if frozen needles were piercing my skin, I felt sticky and uncomfortable all over. I washed my hands and returned home with my parents. But the matter didn't end there. Everyone around had seen the split and nailed beam. They buzzed with speculation, convinced there was treasure inside, especially Victor, whose eyes gleamed like a hungry wolf. He boldly pulled the village chief aside. Clearly there's something in the beam. Since it's been replaced, why not pull it up and open it? It belongs to the whole clan anyway. Victor was a notorious spendthrift, his wife a gambling addict, their whole family living off clan dividends. His son pretended to be a rich young master outside, burning money like trash, even selling ancestral land last year to pay debts. The village chief looked at him with contempt, merely scoffed, and waved his hand, sealing the well. My father also gave Victor a disdainful glance, then turned to me and said, "This is our clan's rule. Once the beam is down, it must be buried with the well." Buried with the well? Does that mean entombed? Could there really be a corpse in the beam? As my father spoke, the clan elder led several strong young men to lower the stone lid onto the well, then sealed it with cement. Not only that, they also used iron chains carved with talismans and a strange golden lock to secure the well opening tightly. This was a complete seal, to prevent anyone from secretly digging up the beam for treasure. Afterward, the entire village buzzed with discussion, speculating what was hidden inside. People thought that since Ruby and I didn't feel the beam was very heavy, it probably wasn't gold or silver. But if not gold or silver, it couldn't be paintings or scriptures either, so why bury it in the well? All that day, groups of people kept coming to my house, probing to see if I had felt anything inside the beam. The clan elder even sent someone to instruct me to purify my body for 3 days, only eating vegetarian food and porridge, then to go to the ancestral hall to chant scriptures for 3 days before performing the installing the beam ceremony. But that very night, I dreamed of the snake again. This time, it no longer nagged about eating egg yolks. It opened its mouth and lunged straight at me, hissing viciously, "Leave the village, leave the village." I woke up in a fright, my heart pounding. Still confused by the dream, the sound of gongs rang out from outside. Someone died, the gongs echoed through the night. The first thought that flashed in my mind was the beam buried in the well. I was so scared my heart felt like it would drop into an abyss. I immediately called my parents and ran with the crowd towards the ancestral hall. When we arrived, I found that the old well, sealed with cement, had been pried open. It was unclear if the ridge beam inside had been pulled out, but a person lay slumped on the well's edge, seemingly bowing down to do something. In the middle of the night, there weren't many people around yet. I stepped closer for a look and immediately realized the person wasn't just half kneeling, half lying on the well's edge. Their lower half was slumped over the well curb, while their upper body was nowhere to be seen. Inside the well shaft, the water was stained with blood, and countless geckos of all sizes crawled back and forth, as if hunting mosquitoes, but also seemingly licking blood. In the deep, dark well, something seemed to be swimming, and amidst the splashing water, there were interspersed sounds of gurgling chewing and sharp scratching against the well walls. These sounds were even more unpleasant than fingernails scraping a blackboard. At the same time, the spot where my cinnabar mark was suddenly throbbed intensely, as if something was burrowing inside. Something major had happened at the old well sealing the main beam. The clan elder and village chief immediately rushed over. First, they calmed everyone down, then said that this matter concerned what was inside the main beam. If people didn't want to lose their share of the clan's profits, it was best not to let the death leak out. I was so terrified by the half-corpse that my legs went weak. My mother quickly took me home, calling my name repeatedly along the way, trying to call back my soul. Back home, she quickly splashed rice water, burned joss paper, and performed a ritual. But in my mind, the strange sounds echoing from the old well, the image of fresh blood splattering the well walls and the dangling legs of the corpse still resonated. It wasn't until dawn that my father returned, telling us the deceased was Victor. He had always coveted the treasure inside the main beam, thinking he could act while the cement was still wet. So he called his son Astor and daughter Ruby out in the middle of the night to open the well and steal the main beam. According to Astor's account, when they opened the well, he shone a flashlight, and Victor used a hook to try and pull out the main beam. But as soon as he leaned his head down, a snake as thick as a thigh suddenly shot out from the well, biting off half his body, then fell back into the well. Ruby was so scared she became foolish, while Astor dragged his sister and ran. It was also Astor who ran through the village shouting that someone had died, causing the ancestral hall keeper to beat the gongs as a signal. The village chief had convened a meeting of all household heads, saying that under no circumstances should this matter be revealed. He implied that there was a huge treasure in the main beam, and if the police were called, they would be forced to surrender it. Did everyone want to exchange it for just a commendation certificate? Hearing this, the image of Victor's half-severed upper body immediately flashed in my mind. I tried to suppress my unease and asked, was there really a snake as thick as a thigh in the well? I thought about Victor's wound. It was indeed a clean bite. But could a snake bite off half a person in one go? Don't they usually constrict their prey or use venom to kill? A single bite severing half a body, was it a great white shark? So, was there truly a giant python in the well, or was the clan elder fabricating a story to cover something up? Seeing that my father still didn't understand the issue, I continued. If there really is a large snake in the well, aren't the village chief and others going to do anything about it? What if it crawls out and bites people? My father, hearing this, finally started to worry. I added fuel to the fire. Even if it doesn't crawl out with such a monster in the well, no matter how important the treasure in the main beam is, it can't be taken out anymore, right? I continued to entice him. I think we should still call the police. At the very least, they should catch that snake. This is the age of law, not the past. If our clan doesn't want to surrender the treasure in the main beam, the police can't force it. But a snake this big, our villagers can't deal with it. My father seemed convinced by this, immediately turned to find other villagers, wanting to discuss calling the police with the village chief. Of course, the more important thing was how to get the treasure out of the main beam. If it was carefully hidden for future generations, he wouldn't get a share. After he left, I thought of that strange children's rhyme and decided to find the children who had sung it to ask for clarification. My mother was also scared. I told her to rest at home, and I went out. But as soon as I opened the door, a bizarre sight appeared. Numerous geckos covered the door, even clinging tightly to the doorknob. I almost touched one when I opened the door. These geckos were identical to the ones that crawled out of the main beam yesterday, with a bright red dot on their forehead. An image suddenly flashed in my mind, the geckos crawling over the bloodstains at the well. They also had red marks on their foreheads. At that moment, the cinnabar mark on my hand suddenly throbbed with sharp pain, as if needles were piercing my skin. I turned my head to look at the wall, seeing the corner was also covered in geckos. Why are there so many geckos? My mother also felt disgusted, quickly clasped her hands, and muttered, "Geckos protect, guard the house and door." Then she turned to me, coaxing, "They don't bite people, they just eat mosquitoes. They're not snakes, don't be afraid." But I felt that geckos, cinnabar geckos, thurkung, main beams, and yin dragons all seemed to be connected. After a moment's thought, I told my mother to call my brother home immediately. My father was stubborn and favored sons over daughters. On clan matters, he would only listen to my brother. I had a feeling something big was about to happen in our village, and my brother needed to be here. My mother immediately nodded, went inside to call him, while I grabbed a wooden stick my mother had given me and left the house. It was still early morning, and everyone in the village was already awake. Along the way, people kept stopping me, asking, "Is it true you saw Victor's corpse last night? Did the main beam turn into a snake?" I dealt with them while looking for the children who had sung the rhyme the day before. Because the village chief had cut their family's share of the sand quarry money by half, everyone in the village knew about it now. I stopped by the general store to buy some snacks, planning to use them to entice the children. Honestly, as I passed Ruby's house, I suddenly saw her hunched in a corner of the wall, hair disheveled, face pressed against the wall, her lips constantly moving as if mumbling something. Remembering that she had witnessed the scene at the well firsthand, I guessed what she saw was even more terrifying than Aster's account. I took out a bottle of soda from my bag, softly called out to her, and at the same time turned on my phone's flashlight, shining it as I approached. I wanted to ask her about the snake in the well, but when the flashlight beam hit half of Ruby's face, I immediately froze on the spot. She wasn't whispering. She was pressing her face against the wall, opening her mouth for the geckos to crawl into. She swallowed one whole, chewing it ravenously. The sound I heard was her chewing and swallowing geckos. The wall she leaned against was covered in geckos, all heading towards her, as if just waiting for her to open her mouth to immediately crawl in for her to eat. Seeing me look over, Ruby bared her teeth and smiled at me, reaching out to grab a gecko from the wall and offering it to me. She chewed one herself, signaling for me to eat with her. I was so scared my entire body stiffened. The gecko in her hand struggled, its 4 legs constantly flailing. Under the phone's light, besides the red dot on its forehead, its 4 feet glowed a bright red. This was clearly not a common gecko, Thatch sung, but a cinnabar gecko, Thurkung. The difference between a common gecko and a cinnabar gecko is that a cinnabar gecko must be fed cinnabar from birth, and its paw pads will be red. But cinnabar is so expensive. How could anyone raise so many cinnabar geckos? This thing is poisonous. How can she eat it raw? I quickly grabbed a branch and brushed the cinnabar geckos off the wall, preventing them from entering Ruby's mouth. At the same time, I yelled into the house, "Come out quickly!" Ruby's mother heard me and ran out. Seeing her daughter chewing and swallowing cinnabar geckos, she also shrieked. But the clan elder and village chief behind her only looked at each other. No one spoke. The clan elder took a handful of powdered medicine from his pocket and sprinkled it on the wall. The densely packed cinnabar geckos immediately scattered. The clan elder sternly shouted, "Aren't you going to hold her down quickly? Geckos are one of the 5 poisons. Don't you know how poisonous its urine is? If she eats them like this, she's not far from death." Gecko urine in the eyes causes blindness, in the ears deafness, on the skin it causes rot. Eating anything a gecko has crawled over will lead to poisoning and death. People always say overnight tea shouldn't be drunk, also out of fear that a gecko might have urinated in it, concealed by the tea leaves. Hearing the clan elder's loud shout, the village chief and Aster immediately came to their senses, rushing forward, fumbling to hold Ruby tightly. The clan elder quickly broke a branch from a nearby tree, forced Ruby's mouth open, and deeply poked inside to make her vomit. She had clearly just swallowed them, but no matter how deep the clan elder poked the wooden stick, Ruby could only retch dryly, unable to vomit. Witnessing her mouth being scraped raw by the wooden stick, her eyes rolled back, yet the clan elder continued to push the stick deeper. I could only open my mouth and say, "How about giving her a strong saltwater solution first to induce vomiting? I'll call an ambulance." This was a matter of life and death. I couldn't just stand by and watch her suffer. But the clan elder suddenly turned and gave me a cold glance, then leaned close to the village chief's ear and whispered something. The village chief glanced at me, then unexpectedly lifted the hand pressing on Ruby's shoulder, gripped her head, and forcefully slammed it against the wall. I shrieked in horror. The clan elder then straightened up and smiled at me. "She's mad now, even eating live geckos. We can only knock her out first. There are medics in the ancestral hall. I'm a doctor. I'll give them to her later. Taking her to the hospital, I'm afraid, won't be in time. Don't worry, I've already calculated it. You are all people with great fortune to be able to receive the beam. She'll be fine." His smile was very strange, with an inexplicable grimness. Taking her to the ancestral hall isn't imprisonment. I opened my mouth to say something, but the clan elder chuckled and continued. "Just now, on my way here, I met your father. He's worried about your brother's marriage, trying to save money to buy a house in the city. Coincidentally, yesterday the mine was short of a waste manager, so I sent someone to take him. He should be on his way now, right? The mine is the clan's biggest source of income. It has always been decided by the clan elder and village chief's families. Whatever is distributed each year is what it is. No one in the clan dares to question it. There are still minerals left in the waste piles, and there are people specializing in buying them. The profits are incredibly lucrative. Such a good job, how could it be my father's turn? No matter how eager he was to leave, he couldn't have left without saying goodbye, not even bringing his clothes. Clearly, the clan elder was using my father to threaten me. I looked at him with a cold smile, then watched Ruby's retreating back as the village chief carried her away. I intended to turn around and call my father, telling him to find a way to come back immediately. But just then, the clan elder spoke again. "Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. When your father got in the car, he was too rushed and excited and dropped and broke his phone. It's with me now." He pulled out a phone with a shattered screen from his pocket, shaking it in front of me. "You need to calm down these days, don't run around. I'll have it repaired and sent to the mine later. If there's anything at home, just come find me. I'll call your Uncle Tang, he's also working at the mine. Don't call there unless it's really important. The mine is very dangerous." The mine is dangerous, accidents happen easily. If the clan elder's son were to do something, say the mine collapsed, burying my father's body in it, then there wouldn't even be bones left. I clutched my phone, looking at the clan elder, only able to force a smile. "Nothing is wrong at home. That's good then." The clan elder smiled kindly, stepped closer, and said, "Since you're receiving the beam, you should keep your body pure. Don't eat snacks and such anymore. If you can't do that, you'll also have to stay in the ancestral hall like Ruby. Once you perform the beam ritual, won't your father also come back with your brother to repair the ancestral hall?" "Right." In other words, at least I had to perform the beam ritual for my father to return. I stared at the clan elder, about to say something, but he shoved the broken screen phone into my hand. He patted my shoulder, smiled gently, and turned to leave. Ruby's mother, standing beside me, also chuckled. "To be able to install the main beam of the ancestral hall, what an honorable thing. You should be happy." Her husband had just died, her daughter had gone mad, yet she could still smile like a flower. It seemed the clan elder and village chief had promised her considerable benefits. I don't know how I left Ruby's house, but not far away, I saw the village children again catching geckos. They held mineral water bottles, stuffing every gecko they caught inside. Each bottle contained several geckos, and one child even filled an entire bottle. Perhaps they recognized me. One of them suddenly threw a gecko straight at me, intending to scare me. The thought that this creature might have crawled out of that large beam made my heart go cold. Instinctively, I raised the wooden stick to strike. But strangely, the gecko flying through the air seemed to be blocked by something invisible, immediately falling straight to the ground. At the same time, the geckos clinging to stones and walls, as if frightened by something, all scattered and fled, exactly like when the clan elder sprinkled his powder earlier. I instinctively looked around but found nothing unusual. The children stuck out their tongues and made faces at me, then chased after the geckos. I quickly took out some snacks I had brought and gave them to the children. They were already familiar with me, knowing I was the new girl chosen to receive the main beam, so they weren't afraid and even knew the rules well. Accepting the snacks, the leader looked at me and said directly, "Okay, we've eaten your food, we won't scare you anymore." I was torn between laughter and tears, but still seriously asked, "Who taught you the children's rhyme you sang yesterday?" "The one with bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed." "Oh, that." The leader looked surprised, then pointed beside me and said, "The person in the ancient opera costume who was with you. He just helped you block that gecko too. Aren't you two together?" My entire body stiffened instantly. There was no one beside me. I looked in the direction the child pointed but still saw nothing. However, the other children stuck out their tongues and made faces at the empty space beside me, then hugged their snacks and skipped away. This time their rhyme changed to, "Well stands entombed, charm locked in place, life destroyed, forever unrest. Yin Dragon emerges, geckos scatter, vengeful spirits demand lives, the whole clan perishes." The previous rhyme mentioned the main beam hiding a corpse. This one spoke of burial in the well and geckos filling the village. If all of it were true, would the entire clan truly be annihilated? A chill ran down my spine. I looked again in the direction the child had just pointed, trying to reach out and touch the air. The ancients said that children still possessed heavenly eyes, not yet obscured, so they could see things adults couldn't. Many ancient texts also recorded that before disaster struck, children's rhymes would appear as a warning from heaven, leaving one last chance for survival. Just now, the gecko had indeed fallen in midair, but no matter how many times I waved my hand through the air, I couldn't touch anything. At this moment, I wasn't sure if the children were teasing me or if there truly was an invisible presence helping me from the shadows. But my father had been taken to the mine by the clan elder. If I escaped, he could very well suffer an accident. Even if I reported to the police, by the time they reached the mine, the clan elder would only need to say my father was in charge of waste, and nothing could be done. With a heavy heart, I decided to go to the ancestral hall to check the situation first. Along the way, I found that the walls of every house in the village were covered in geckos. Even pathways, bushes, and roadside rocks had quite a few crawling on them. The villagers found it strange, saying they had never seen so many geckos. Some even said these creatures were very expensive, and if caught and sold, they would bring in a good amount of money. Some sharp-eyed individuals recognized them, saying that these creatures had red cinnabar marks on their 4 feet, clearly cinnabar geckos, which were even more valuable. However, no one knew how to deal with them, except for the enthusiastic children who chased them. Adults merely swept them away with brooms or sprayed insecticide. Upon reaching the ancestral hall, I noticed that paradoxically there were very few geckos here. The old well had been sealed again, this time even more tightly than before, not just with a stone lid but also surrounded by a brick wall and sealed with cement. But the iron chain carved with talismans and the strange golden lock still guarded the well's mouth. This was probably the charm lock mentioned in the rhyme. The remaining half of Victor's corpse was still in a coffin placed to one side. There wasn't even a memorial hall. He had died such a tragic death, yet his wife and children had no intention of bringing the other half of his body home for funeral rites. Since the main beam had not yet been installed, the ancestral hall remained unrepaired. Added to the recent events, there weren't many people around. I still wanted to find Ruby to ask exactly what had bitten off Victor's lower body last night. Only then could I plan my next step. Could I only sit and wait for death? But usually no one was allowed to enter the ancestral hall uninvited, and it was also very large. I walked around for a while but still couldn't find where Ruby was imprisoned. As I was about to turn and go in another direction, I suddenly heard a rustling sound. A snake, as thick as my thumb, dropped from the eaves, blocking my path, constantly flicking its tongue and slowly slithering closer. The sudden appearance of the snake startled me, and I instinctively recoiled. But then I remembered the 2 consecutive dreams about snakes and the words spoken, vaguely feeling that this might be the snake I had saved from the children that day. I suppressed my fear, gripped the wooden stick in my hand, and took a step forward. "You don't want me to go that way, you want me to back off." The snake seemed surprised that I responded to it. Its flicking tongue immediately froze, then it gently nodded and with a rustle slithered past my feet. As the snake's body brushed past, my entire body tingled and I gripped the stick, almost swinging it down but forced myself to hold back. The snake crawled behind me, then turned its head back, signaling me to follow. I never thought I would one day have to follow a snake. It seemed very familiar with the ancestral hall, leading me through a narrow wall I had never seen before, then turning into a small door, finally stopping beneath the window of a dark room. It crawled onto the windowsill, coiled itself, and turned its head inward, as if wanting me to look inside. But with a snake coiled on the windowsill, I dared not approach. I wasn't good with snakes. Although it wasn't a clearly venomous triangular-headed type, who knew if it was poisonous? Seeing my hesitation, it tilted its head, seemingly helpless, then slithered down from the windowsill, coiled in a corner of the wall, and lay still. Looking at its demeanor, I secretly confirmed. This was the snake that had helped me avoid the children's prank the other day. It truly was on the verge of becoming a spirit and could even understand human hearts. I clasped my hands in front of my chest, expressing my gratitude, then carefully leaned into the window, peeking inside. With just one glance, I was immediately so terrified that my legs went weak, almost screaming. I quickly bit down hard on the wooden stick in my mouth to suppress the shout. Inside the dark room, Ruby was tied tightly to a red-painted wooden pillar, her hair pulled up and hung from a nail on the pillar. This posture forced her face against the pillar because her hair was pulled up, her chin slightly upturned, and her mouth slightly agape. Countless cinnabar geckos crawled along the pillar, as if led by a guide, one by one entering her mouth. Because her hair was tied up, she couldn't even chew. She could only watch helplessly as the cinnabar geckos moved along her half-tilted face, crawled into the corner of her mouth, and wiggled their slender, agile tails before disappearing inside. There were too many. She couldn't swallow fast enough and could only let them crawl in. Her throat was slightly upturned, and the shadows of the cinnabar geckos crawling down could be seen. The front of her clothes was also pulled open, clearly showing each cinnabar gecko entering her esophagus. Her belly was already swollen, evidently having swallowed quite a few, and occasionally small lumps protruded, as if the cinnabar geckos were still alive after entering her stomach. The clan elder held a stone mortar, grinding something, but this time not applying it to the hand. He ripped open the front of Ruby's garment, dabbing the red powder onto several important acupoints on her chest. At the same time, the cinnabar geckos on the pillar became even more agitated, like moths to a flame, swarming into her mouth. While applying the powder, he spoke, "That girl Luna is very cunning. She must have guessed something already." Victor broke open the ancestral grave in the well, releasing the Yin Dragon, causing cinnabar geckos to spread throughout the village. Relying solely on Ruby, we cannot lead them back. We must bring Luna into the ancestral hall soon, lead the cinnabar geckos into her body, and let the Yin Dragon coil above her head. If we don't continue like this, we won't be able to control the villagers anymore. Meanwhile, the village chief stood before a painted character on the wall, slowly saying, "I told you, girls shouldn't read too many books. No need to worry about the villagers, just give them a bit more profit and they won't say a word." I looked at the painting. It was the character, N, meaning peace safety. But strangely, the Mayan radical Mayan roof above was drawn as two dragons playing with a pearl, and their tails intertwined, forming the new radical new female below. The roof protecting the female, meaning safety from the cinnabar gecko, Yin Dragon Coiling the Peak. In a flash, I understood the entire key and felt a chill run through my body. So, at Ruby's house, the clan elder wasn't unable to extract the cinnabar geckos she had swallowed. He had intentionally allowed her to swallow them. They knew the Yin Dragon had escaped, and the cinnabar geckos had scattered, so Ruby wasn't frightened into madness. Instead, they used the opportunity to bring her into the ancestral hall so she would lead the cinnabar geckos into her body. And the cinnabar mark powder applied to my arm was the key to attracting the cinnabar geckos into my body. No wonder the man in ancient attire that day told me not to get the cinnabar mark. No wonder the village chief's granddaughter, May, ate egg yolks. Egg yolks contained certain male hormones that caused the cinnabar mark on her hand to dissolve when exposed to medicated wine. That's why the village chief's granddaughter and the clan elder's granddaughter, both under 20, had their cinnabar marks disappear with just medicated wine. Having understood all this, I dared not stay long and quietly turned to leave. But as soon as I moved my hand, I touched something cold and soft that was wriggling. I was so scared I almost screamed. Looking down, I saw the windowsill and wall covered with cinnabar geckos. They were looking up at me. Some had even crawled along my arm to my shoulder. Seeing me turn my head, they tried to crawl onto my face. One had already dug its small, sharp claws into my chin. I immediately clenched my mouth shut, not daring to make a sound, afraid of alerting the clan elder inside. I was about to brush off all these cinnabar geckos when the clan elder suddenly spoke. "Oh, why are there cinnabar geckos crawling outside?" I was instantly terrified, completely at a loss for what to do. Just then, I suddenly felt something cold brush past my leg. That snake had slithered along my leg, darting straight onto me. As soon as it appeared, the cinnabar geckos immediately scattered in fright. I suddenly understood. That day, when the children threw the cinnabar geckos at me, only those that fell to the ground ran away, while the others did not. It turned out this snake had been following me all along. Hearing the clan elder's footsteps approaching the window, I had no time to think. Panicked, I clutched the small snake on my shoulder and quickly hunched over, running into the narrow wall beside me. Just as I managed to hide myself in the dark corner between the two walls, I heard a click. The clan elder opened the window and stuck his head out to observe. When he opened the door, the cinnabar geckos that had gathered on the windowsill seemed to smell something, all flicked their tongues, raised their heads, and crawled into the room through the gap. The clan elder turned his head to look around, then sighed. "The cinnabar geckos are increasing. We can't delay any longer. We must bring Luna into the ancestral hall and install the beam soon." The village chief also spoke, his voice heavy with fatigue. "My wooden beam is planed and ready. If you've finished boiling the pine resin, we can start creating the Yin Dragon. We must not let this century-old matter fail in our hands." After that, the clan elder closed the window. In the dark room, only the sound of something being ground in the mortar echoed. My entire body was cold, so much so that I couldn't even feel myself holding a snake in my hand. Waiting until I was certain the dark room was completely silent, I carefully hugged the wall, gradually backing out. It wasn't until I reached the back courtyard of the ancestral hall and saw the sunlight that I took several deep breaths and regained my composure. The snake in my hand coiled and gently squeezed my arm. Its scales rubbed against my skin, giving me goosebumps. But strangely, I was no longer afraid as before. I released it to the ground, glanced towards the old well, then summoned all my courage and ran straight home. My father was a clear lesson. First, I had to find a way for my mother to take him away before I could escape. On the way back, I saw May and Lana catching cinnabar geckos. As soon as they saw me, they flinched, hugged their glass jars tightly, and ran away. Thinking of the disgusting things the village chief and clan elder had done, I didn't want to bother with them anymore. Before reaching home, I grabbed the snake, coiled it up, and put it in my coat pocket. As I stepped through the door, I saw my mother burning mugwort to ward off cinnabar geckos. She saw me return, her eyes flickering before she said, "The village chief called me. He said your father went to handle the quarry matters. You know your father's temperament. How could he manage these things? So, I told your brother to go straight to the quarry. This is much better than repairing the ancestral hall." Hearing this, I felt a chill run through me and quickly pulled my mother. "Mother, do you know what the village chief means? The quarry is very dangerous. 2 lives lost are just a few shovels of dirt there. That's a quarry. For so many years, there have been fools in the clan who recklessly wanted to inspect the mine's ledgers. But has anyone who went ever returned? If Ethan has already gone, please call him quickly and tell him to take father and leave this place. Don't come back for now. You must also leave immediately. After meeting father and Ethan, immediately report to the police to save me." I was so worried my palms were sweating, racking my brain to save the situation. This was still a society governed by law. Only if my family was safe could I find an opportunity to escape the village without worries. But my mother still seemed not to understand, just looking at me silently with evasive eyes. I decided to call my brother myself, but his phone was unreachable. My heart panicked, not knowing what to do. Just then, the snake in my pocket stirred twice. Its cold skin brushed against my fingers, making me shiver but also slowly clearing my mind. It was then I realized something was wrong with my mother's complexion. I looked at her, and an ominous premonition rose in my heart. "Mother, you know what the village chief means by sending them to the quarry at this time, don't you?" She remained silent, then whispered, "Yes. This is our family's compensation for you receiving the beam." She sighed. "It should be this way. Look at Ruby. Her father secretly dug up the old well's beam, but the clan didn't pursue it. The village chief even promised that as long as Ruby installed the beam, even if she's a married woman, she'll still get a share. Victor's share of money will also be received until his wife dies." I was startled. She continued, her voice full of determination, "Now you are still a normal person. As long as you install the beam, everything will be fine. Our family will take on the additional work of managing the mine waste, which is at least hundreds of thousands, sometimes even $1 million a year. Just 1 year's work is enough to pay for your brother's wedding." I stared at her, suddenly feeling cold inside. "Mother, do you know what installing the beam means?" Every word I uttered was chilling. "Bones and flesh rot, wax turns to paste. You know it all, don't you?" My mother avoided my gaze, whispering, "Isn't it just installing the beam?" She clearly knew something, at least understood that receiving the beam and installing the beam were not as harmless as they claimed. It made sense. The beam was only replaced once a century, and with such a grand ceremony, the villagers must have heard some clues, but because the benefits were too great, everyone chose to forget. No wonder Ruby's mother, whose husband died and daughter went mad, still smiled like a flower. This was because only sons in the clan received a share. Daughters didn't, to prevent them from refusing to marry for money, or even bringing in sons-in-law to increase the population and affect clan benefits. Now Ruby would get a share for installing the beam, and Victor's share would still be received after his death. These 2 sums alone were considerable, enough for her mother to gamble away for a lifetime. So, what was a daughter who originally had no share worth? Not to mention managing mine waste, a project that earned tens, even hundreds of thousands annually. So, had my parents chosen to sacrifice me from the very beginning? The snake in my pocket crawled faster and faster, as if reassuring me, but also urging me. I clutched my pocket, looking at my mother, the last ray of hope in my heart completely extinguished. From childhood, they favored my brother. I could understand. After all, he was a son, receiving over 100,000 in dividends each year, while I, a daughter, received no share. They fed me, clothed me, sent me to university. I couldn't ask for too much. So, when they told me to come back and participate in the beam installation ceremony to help the family, though unwilling, I still returned. They always said Ethan was useless, didn't have a decent job, couldn't earn money, couldn't afford a house outside, and therefore couldn't get married. I should help him share the family burden. But how many people working outside earned over 100,000 a year? The men in the clan each received over 100,000 in dividends annually. Shouldn't marrying and having children be easy? So why couldn't Ethan and Aster get married? Was it just about money? They were lazy and greedy and liked to pretend to be rich second-generation heirs. Which girl would fancy them? I, a 996 employee, didn't even earn as much as Ethan did lying around and enjoying his share. Yet my parents still thought I should help him. Mother, you know what will happen if I perform the beam installation, don't you? I looked directly at my mother, asking again. You also know why I called Ethan back, which is why you sent him to the mine, right? I just don't want to install the beam. My mother grew angry at my questions, glaring at me. What? We gave birth to you, fed you, clothed you, sent you to university, and now you're grown up and won't listen to your family about anything. As long as you install the beam, your father and brother can manage the mine waste and get a foothold in the mine's affairs. Our family will also have a say in the clan. Do you know how big a difference that makes? If it weren't for wanting to install the beam, do you think anyone in the village would willingly have daughters? Everyone wants to have more sons to receive more dividends. The more she spoke, the more logical she sounded, and I immediately understood. Before he left, my father was still trying to rally the villagers to retrieve the treasure from the main beam, yet in a blink of an eye, the village chief had instigated him to go to the mine. Because I felt the beam installation was very strange and feared something might happen to my family, I called Ethan back to persuade my father not to let me install the beam. Yet they reacted with such panic. I had initially thought I needed to ensure their safety before escaping the village. But it turned out they knew what installing the beam meant all along. So they had daughters just to be sacrificial offerings for the beam installation. But clearly, the village chief and clan elder still found ways for May and Lana to avoid the ceremony. The village claimed to consult birth charts, but there weren't few girls with suitable charts. Why only me and Ruby? I looked at my mother, suddenly feeling she was a stranger. I gave a bitter laugh, turning to run out. If this so-called danger is just a staged play, then I don't need to stay in the village worrying about my father in the mine anymore. But as soon as I turned, I saw the village chief, Aster, and a group of strong young men surrounding the doorway, each holding sticks and ropes. The village chief looked at me helplessly and said in a low voice, "Last night, your parents told you not to look at Victor's half-corpse, but you insisted. Now what? Scared, aren't you? One Ruby gone mad is enough, now even you're mad. How can we install the beam like this?" So I too had to go mad. Seeing Aster and the men with sticks closing in, I knew they intended to take me to the ancestral hall ahead of schedule. In this situation, escape was clearly impossible. Thinking of the scene where those geckos were led by strings straight into Ruby's mouth, a chill ran down my spine. My hand instinctively fumbled in my pocket, touching the coiled snake, hoping it could use its divine powers to take me away. But the snake only crawled in my pocket and didn't take me. At this moment, the familiar, deep, warm voice from my dreams suddenly echoed in my ear. "The Yin Dragon has appeared. Go with them, don't be afraid." Remembering how he had warned and saved me before, my heart felt a little more at ease. I looked up at the village chief. "You don't need to lay a hand on me, I'll go myself." Before I could finish, I suddenly felt a strong gust of wind hit the back of my neck. I immediately wanted to dodge, but just then his voice resonated in my head again. "Don't move." My body instantly froze, unable to budge. Then a thud sounded behind my head, but something seemed to block it, so apart from the sound, I didn't feel much pain. I instinctively glanced and saw my mother, holding the stick she used to ward off cinnabar geckos, maliciously aiming at me. "Faint," he said again. I blinked, staring at my mother. The stick clearly didn't hit my head, yet my head was ringing. Still, my mother raised the stick and powerfully struck my forehead again. The stick rushed towards my face, and I instinctively squeezed my eyes shut. At the same time, his voice rang out again, accompanied by a soft sigh. Thud! The stick slammed hard onto my forehead, but it still felt like hitting a helmet. There was no pain, only a heavy shock. My body went cold, once again stiffened, and I fell to the ground. I couldn't move, but I didn't pass out. My eyes slightly opened a crack, still able to see a little. I also heard my mother's voice. "She's fainted. You guys take her to the ancestral hall, we'll handle the rest." The village chief chuckled. "She works outside. You'll have to tell her company why she can't return. As for the money share, just like Ruby, it will be divided equally until you, her parents, are no more." Hearing the village chief's words, my mother gave a fawning smile. I lay slumped on the ground, my body stiff. Did my mother truly understand what installing the beam entailed? To get a foot in the door of the mine's affairs, she had hit me twice with a stick to knock me out. Had she ever considered that I might die such a horrible death? I wanted to look at her one more time, but Aster had lifted me onto his back and was walking towards the ancestral hall. Along the way, we met villagers carrying loads of cinnabar geckos. They looked at me curiously. The village chief just shook his head and sighed, saying that I had seen Victor's half-corpse last night, was frightened, and was now a little mad. They feared I would suffer the same fate as Ruby, so they were taking me to the ancestral hall for the clan elder to treat. The villagers all buzzed with discussion. Both girls chosen for the beam installation ritual had encountered trouble, truly an ill omen. Lying sprawled on Aster's back, I suddenly understood why one had to go mad. The girls chosen for the beam installation essentially had no chance to complete the ritual. They were actually buried in the main beam, becoming what was called a Yin Dragon. The villagers definitely needed a reason to find a replacement. Over the centuries, how many times had this ritual been performed? They had set it up step by step, without a single flaw. I was carried into the ancestral hall like that. Aster placed me on a chair in a side room, then the village chief ordered everyone to leave. Afterward, he and the clan elder, each holding one side, carried me into a dark room. As soon as we entered, the rustling of cinnabar geckos echoed inside. The village chief and clan elder threw me to the ground. The clan elder sighed. The well has been sealed, but the Yin Dragon has appeared. There are more and more cinnabar geckos in the village. We must complete this quickly. The village chief, hearing this, reluctantly asked, "How many has Ruby collected?" "Still not enough, but we can't wait any longer." The clan elder's voice was cold. He continued in a low voice, "Just now, the sand quarry called to report that the dredging boat had an accident. The second son went down to fix it and was entangled by a chain, directly severed in half. The Yin Dragon's backlash has brought disaster upon the whole clan. Even the children's rhymes have begun to warn us." "That powerful?" The village chief trembled slightly, his voice revealing clear fear. "Victor only released the Yin Dragon last night, and today 2 lives are already lost. Yin Dragon Coiling Peak brings both fortune and disaster. The greater the fortune, the deeper the disaster. If you want the Yin Dragon to bless your descendants for generations, how can it be without danger?" The clan elder said coldly. He looked at the village chief and said in a low voice, "We cannot delay any longer. First, deal with Ruby to make her the Yin Dragon, then let Luna absorb the cinnabar geckos into her body." Lead the cinnabar geckos into her body meant letting those geckos crawl inside her. I lay face down on the ground, still unable to move, trying my best to open my eyes slightly, glancing towards Ruby tied in the corner. Her belly was swollen like a balloon, and countless things squirmed inside, looking as if they would burst through at any moment. Just as I looked, the clan elder and village chief carried in a ridge beam as thick as 2 people's embrace. The middle part of the beam had been hollowed out, long enough for 2 people to lie down, and lined inside with a long piece of red cloth soaked in pine resin. After setting it in place, the clan elder sprinkled some medicinal powder on the red-painted wood covered in cinnabar geckos. The geckos seemed terrified of this substance, immediately breaking all their connections. When no more crawled into Ruby's mouth, she gasped, about to scream, but the clan elder stuffed 2 drugged plums into her mouth. She couldn't even whimper, only staring at them in despair with wide eyes. But the clan elder and village chief paid no attention, wrapping her tightly in the red cloth soaked in pine resin. After she was completely wrapped, she looked exactly like a giant wrapped candy, still wriggling inside. The village chief sat on her, pressing her down to prevent her from struggling. The clan elder measured little by little with his hand, muttering, 3 feet 3, 4 inches 4. After determining the length, he tightened the 2 ends of the red cloth, one near her head, one near her feet. Then he poured melted pine resin into the tightened knots, sealing them. The strong smell of pine resin filled the air, and the red cloth was oil-resistant. As it was tightly wrapped, Ruby inside continued to struggle. Because the outer layer of cloth was pushed up, the pine resin began to ooze out in patterns, combined with her swollen belly, making her look no different from a fresh red python that had just swallowed its prey. Could this be the Yin Dragon? But Ruby had swallowed so many cinnabar geckos. How could she fit inside the ridge beam? As the thought arose, the deep voice of the man from my dream echoed again, bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed. As soon as he finished speaking, the village chief and clan elder each took a wooden stick. The village chief still sat on Ruby, while the clan elder felt for her head, raising his stick to test its weight. Then he raised the stick high, preparing to strike hard on her forehead, taking her life. The blood spilling onto the red cloth would be unseen by anyone. The pine resin could prevent blood from soaking through, and its strong smell would also mask the metallic scent of blood and the later smell of decay. They intended to use the sticks to crush every inch of Ruby's bones and flesh, forcing them to fit the pre-measured length, turning her into a true Yin dragon. Seeing the clan elder's stick about to swing down, Ruby's legs within the red cloth still twitched, and my heart felt like it would leap from my chest. If not for the snake holding my body tightly, I surely would have screamed. Just then, a frantic cry of anguish came from outside, from the village chief's wife. "Husband, come out quickly. May is in trouble, and Lana too. Hurry, the cinnabar geckos are eating people. Quick." Her voice grew closer and closer. The clan elder glanced at the village chief, then reluctantly put down his stick to go out and see. As soon as he exited the door, the wife rushed in, crying hysterically, "Quick, get the medicine. May is about to be eaten alive by the cinnabar geckos. They're eating people. Both she and Lana are about to be swallowed alive. Save them." Lana was the clan elder's granddaughter. Hearing this, he reluctantly glanced at the red cocoon tightly wrapping Ruby, then at me, unconscious on the ground, before opening a cabinet to grab a jar of powdered medicine and hastily leaving. As soon as he left, my entire body suddenly relaxed. Instinctively, I reached into my pocket to touch the small snake but bumped into a cold hand. I flinched, almost screaming. Turning my head, I saw the man in ancient attire, slightly embarrassed, withdrawing his hand. He softly said, "The Yin Dragon has emerged, the clan will perish. We must go quickly." He glanced at the character, and drawn with coiling dragons on the ridge beam, his eyes darkening. "If we don't run now, I'm afraid there won't be another chance." I immediately scrambled up, about to run, but then heard rustling sounds from within the red cloth, like a fish flailing its tail. Thinking of how she too had been abandoned by her family, my heart suddenly ached. I glanced at the man, saying nothing, just looking at him silently, asking, "Can we save her?" The man's eyes moved, as if he suddenly thought of something, but he still strode forward, his fingertip flashing slightly, immediately tearing open the red cloth already stained with pine resin. I quickly supported Ruby. Tears welled in her eyes, her cheeks swollen from eating wild plums, and something squirmed in her throat. She had swallowed a belly full of cinnabar geckos. Even if she ran, she couldn't go far. Moreover, cinnabar geckos are poisonous. Having eaten so many, she was probably already poisoned. I reached out and pulled the wild plums from her mouth, intending to tell her to find a place to hide herself. At least it was better than being beaten to death, her flesh and bones shattered to pulp. The man beside me softly sighed, slowly passing his hand gently over her belly. Ruby immediately doubled over to one side, and cinnabar geckos gushed out of her mouth. Before long, all of them were vomited out. Although the ground was slimy with dirty water and geckos crawled everywhere, at least Ruby's life might be saved. I sincerely glanced at the man, thanking him. He smiled softly, nodding at me. "You know the way out of the village. I won't see you off. I have to go to the old well to check. There are a few things of mine inside." I had saved him once, just a convenient act. But he had saved me more than once. I couldn't keep relying on him. I pulled Ruby, signaling her not to speak, and helped her climb through the back window, intending to sneak out along the wall. Just as I pushed Ruby out, the man's voice suddenly echoed in my mind. "My name is Azure. If you are in danger, you can press this scale to call me." Following that, my palm suddenly stung. I looked down and saw a small scale, the size of a fingernail, had suddenly grown on my hand. I nodded at him, then flipped over and climbed out the window. Azure had led me along this path once before, so I wasn't too unfamiliar with it. I tightly held Ruby's hand, took the narrow path along the wall into the back courtyard, then climbed over the wall, finally setting foot in the rice fields behind. We used the waist-high rice plants for cover. We followed the drainage canal straight to the river. As long as we escaped downstream and met people from outside the village, we could ask for help and report to the police. But just as we climbed over the wall and hid in the perennial shrub, preparing to rush towards the rice fields, we suddenly heard piercing screams from afar. Instinctively, I looked in that direction and saw a person covered in cinnabar geckos, hair disheveled, frantically scratching at their body, screaming continuously, "Father, pull them off, pull them off." judging by the voice, it was none other than May. There wasn't a single patch of intact skin left on her body. Some areas were covered in cinnabar geckos, others were scratched raw and bloody, and some spots looked like they had festered and oozed a foul-smelling, slimy liquid. The village chief's son and daughter-in-law tried several times to rush to save her but were held back by the villagers. May's screams grew more and more pathetic, her pain so uncontrollable that she charged straight towards the ancestral hall. In her current state, she looked like a demon. No one in the village dared to pull her back, only using poles to block her frantic movements. Behind her, the clan elder was sprinkling powdered medicine on another person also covered in cinnabar geckos. That was Lana. The clan elder's powdered medicine could ward off cinnabar geckos. Soon, Lana's entire body was covered in a layer of white powder. She lay curled up on the ground, groaning in pain. Seeing she was controlled, the clan elder immediately hugged the jar of medicine and continued sprinkling it on May. But after only 2 handfuls, clearing the cinnabar geckos from her face, a gut-wrenching scream suddenly rang out from the crowd behind. "Lana!" I saw Lana, who had been covered in powdered medicine, suddenly ooze a brownish, slimy liquid that not only washed away all the powder on her body, but also gradually saturated the ground where she lay with a thick, viscous fluid. She looked no different from a melting snowman, her flesh and blood slowly dissolving into that tea-colored liquid. She agonizingly opened her mouth to scream, but as soon as she did, mouthfuls of thick, viscous liquid gushed from her throat. Her mother screamed Lana's name, desperately trying to rush forward, but the situation was clearly beyond saving. Those nearby could only hold her back. In just a moment, beneath Lana's body was only a puddle of slime. Several white bones floated in the half-solid, half-liquid puddle, looking like wooden sticks stuck in melting ice cream. The incident happened too quickly. Even the clan elder who was sprinkling medicine on May was stunned. The village chief's mother saw this and immediately rushed forward, pushing the clan elder away, extending her arms to shield May and screaming, "What kind of medicine is this? What is this medicine? This medicine is poisonous. Poisonous." The clan elder also seemed not to have expected such a thing to happen. He and the village chief exchanged glances, helplessness briefly appearing on both their faces. But in just a blink, Lana on the ground had completely turned into a puddle of slime. Even her bones seemed to have melted, gradually disappearing into that thick, viscous fluid. And on May's face, drops of brown liquid trickled down, mixing with the powdered medicine, looking no different from trickling sweat. The village chief's daughter-in-law cried incessantly, but when she saw May's eyelids melt, causing her eyeballs to plop out, she immediately let out a tragic shriek and fainted. May also cried tragically, like a melting candle, running for her life, shouting, "Water, water!" Her appearance was too gruesome, making Ruby behind me tremble violently with fear. I was afraid she would scream, so I quickly covered her mouth, simultaneously shaking my head to signal her not to make a sound. I had initially thought I could seize the opportunity to escape, but now the villagers were all gathered outside the ancestral hall. If Ruby and I ran out now, it would be like falling into a tiger's mouth. We could only wait for the villagers to disperse before trying to escape. Perhaps because May's cries were too mournful, the clan elder stared at the jar of powdered medicine, his eyes full of doubt. In contrast, the village chief seemed to have understood something and loudly shouted to the villagers, "Quickly open the old well, scoop water to wash her. Hurry," a proverb says, "within 5 steps, there must be an antidote." May and Lana dissolving into a slimy liquid looked like cinnabar gecko poisoning, and these cinnabar geckos had all come from the main beam. The main beams that had sealed Yin dragons for generations were all buried in the old well. The village chief probably thought of the principle of mutual generation and mutual overcoming, so he wanted to see if the well water could prevent May from dissolving. Fortunately, the cement layer sealing the old well hadn't been poured long. The village chief called people to open the well. The work wasn't too difficult. But the clan elder tightly grabbed him and said in a low voice, "Those beams, the Yin dragon has escaped. The entire clan will perish. If we don't find an antidote, the next person could be us." The village chief gritted his teeth and spoke each word clearly. Immediately after, he swung his hand and opened the well. The clan elder immediately understood his intention. Now the village was full of cinnabar geckos, and no one knew who would be the next Lana or May. The village chief either wanted to save his granddaughter or wanted to use May to test if the old well water could truly detoxify the cinnabar geckos. Such a strange event occurred, but the crowd gathered outside the ancestral hall not only didn't decrease but grew larger. The bolder villagers followed the village chief into the ancestral hall to open the well. The timid ones stood outside, listening to the crowd in front discuss and point at the puddle of liquid Lana had become, their faces filled with fear, whispering. To drive away the cinnabar geckos, they continued to burn mugwort around the ancestral hall and sprinkled various medicinal powders. I pulled Ruby to hide behind the perennial shrub, speechless with distress. The entire village was filled with smoke from the burning mugwort. The cinnabar geckos, having nowhere to hide, also fled behind this perennial shrub. Ruby and I had both been dabbed with cinnabar to attract the cinnabar geckos, so before long, both our bodies were almost completely covered in them. Ruby had more cinnabar applied than I did, so in just a moment, her body was almost entirely covered. If I hadn't tightly covered her mouth, I feared the cinnabar geckos would crawl into her mouth again as before, so I continuously shook my head, signaling Ruby not to move. Outside the ancestral hall, it was packed with people. If Ruby and I made the slightest movement and were discovered, there would only be death. She had tasted pain before. Even though her eyes were filled with fear, she still stiffened and dared not move. I also ignored the geckos crawling all over me, not daring to breathe loudly even for a moment. Fortunately, before long, I heard the clanging of the iron chain locking the old well, indicating the well had been opened. Then came the villagers' shouts of surprise, yells to drive away the geckos, and the clanging of iron buckets. This was followed by the sound of water rushing down. The crowd whispered, sometimes discussing whether the well water could detoxify the cinnabar geckos, sometimes speculating what treasure was hidden in the main beam, whether the ancestors had buried the main beam in the old well with a large snake to guard the treasure. But immediately after, the village chief loudly said, "It's all right, everyone, rest assured. This well water can detoxify cinnabar geckos. There's no need to be afraid anymore. If you're bitten by a gecko or get their urine on you, just go to the old well and wash." All of this is because of Victor's greed, stealing treasure from the main beam, opening the well, and releasing the Yin Dragon, causing it to disperse into cinnabar geckos. As long as we seal the beam again, the Yin Dragon Coiling Peak will ensure the clan's peace for generations. After the beam is sealed, each clan member will receive an additional 5 shares of profit this year, the village chief announced excitedly. The villagers outside, who had been fearful of the gecko poison, now heard that the well water was an antidote and that there would be additional profit shares, and immediately surged into the ancestral hall in excitement. Seeing the villagers gradually disperse, I relaxed. My hand covering Ruby's mouth also dropped. Taking her hand, I intended to pull her towards the rice fields, but with a tug, she didn't move at all. Confused, I turned my head and saw her brushing geckos from her face while touching the corner of her mouth. Her mouth, which had chewed and swallowed live geckos, was already swollen, red, and festering. Now, as she touched it, the torn skin revealed oozing pus. She glanced at the puddle of liquid Lana had become, not far away, her eyes filled with fear. Her hand slowly moved from the corner of her mouth down to her throat, then touched her belly. In a hoarse voice, she said to me, "Actually, there wasn't a large snake in the well. My father was torn in half by the geckos crawling out, and their urine dissolved him into pus. In that main beam, there was actually only one Yin Dragon. One Yin Dragon." This meant that when Victor and the others opened the main beam, they saw only one Yin Dragon inside. But why only one? Shouldn't there be 2? The character, and clearly showed 2 dragon tails intertwined, playing with a pearl. If she knew what a Yin Dragon was, why did she pretend to be foolish? Moreover, 2 people were clearly chosen to be beam-receiving girls, so why was there only one Yin Dragon? Where was the other one? I looked into Ruby's fearful eyes, scanning the pus oozing from the corner of her mouth, and her deliberate mention of only one Yin Dragon. In that instant, I suddenly realized something, immediately pushed her away, no longer caring about anything else, and ran headlong towards the rice fields. As soon as I lifted my leg, my waist felt heavy. Ruby clung tightly to me with both hands, screaming hoarsely, "Luna is running away. Luna won't install the beam. She wants to harm the whole village." Luna is running away? We were only a wall away from the old well, and her shout immediately caused the village chief and the crowd gathered by the well to rush over the wall. Ruby still clutched me, then pretended to be mad again, giggling, "Luna is running away, I caught her. Yin Dragon ascending the beam, ascending the beam." The village chief glanced at her, then looked at me, his eyes full of mockery. In the clan elder's cloudy eyes, the grim smile became even more pronounced. I pushed Ruby with all my strength and said in a low voice to the villagers, "The old well is open. You can all look inside. The so-called Yin Dragon is just virgins wrapped in red cloth and then beaten to a pulp with wooden sticks. Look, there's no Yin Dragon coiling the beam, just human remains." I looked at Ruby in anger. She knew there was only one Yin Dragon in the main beam. If she became the Yin Dragon, I wouldn't have to. The village chief brought me to the ancestral hall, probably just to lure the divine snake into my body and then throw it into the sealed old well, or perhaps just to find another place to hide the corpse. But I had saved Ruby, yet out of fear of becoming a Yin Dragon, fearing she would end up like Lana, dissolving into a puddle of pus, she betrayed me. Just as I pushed Ruby away, she still clung to my neck, whispering in my ear, "Luna, if you don't save yourself, you'll be damned. You saved me once, save me again. If you lead the Buddha, lead him to the Western paradise. If you save, save completely." Hearing Ruby's words, my hand, which was pushing her away, suddenly froze. I slowly withdrew my hand, clenching it into a fist, my palm aching from the snake scale piercing it. Looking down at Ruby's frantic, unclear expression, my heart gradually turned cold. Sure enough, I couldn't be a saint. I parted my lips, about to call Azure's name, but seeing the villagers surging towards me, I swallowed it. Even if one wanted to cultivate a Yin Dragon, there had to be a process. Azure seemed unwilling to appear in front of others, so it wouldn't be too late to call him in a secret place. These villagers seemed to have not heard my words at all. Perhaps, as the village chief said, they simply didn't care what a Yin Dragon was. After all, it wasn't their daughters who were going to die. Yin Dragon coiling the main beam, abundant harvests. Main beam maiden, benefiting the ancestral hall. As long as they could receive the clan's profits, that was enough. They didn't care whose daughter died or how she died. As long as it wasn't their turn, other people's problems were just a story. I was tied up by the villagers, had a stick forced into my mouth, and was dragged to the ancestral hall. In the crowd, my mother and Ruby's mother stood side by side, both showing pity, shouting loudly, "Why did she go mad all of a sudden?" My heart grew colder. Before such great benefits, what was a biological daughter? My heart cold, I was pushed into the ancestral hall again by the villagers. This time, we went straight through the back courtyard, past the old well. It was then I realized that even though May's body had been washed clean of gecko urine, her skin looked burned. Her entire body had no intact areas. At this moment, she lay soaked on the cement floor next to the well, only breathing out, unable to inhale. The village chief saw me glance at the old well and exchanged looks with the clan elder. The two of them, having cooperated for many years, immediately made a decision. Right after, they pulled me to the well's edge and said to the villagers, "On the main beam is the Yin Dragon, there's no treasure at all. For centuries, during times of war, our clan was not consumed by war's fires. When famine struck, we still had abundant harvests. Even now, no matter how difficult it is to earn money outside, we can still discover mines, still extract river sand. Every year, the sons in this village receive 15 or 16 tens of thousands in dividends. All of this is due to the Yin Dragon Coiling Peak blessing our descendants. Generations of ancestors have sealed the Yin Dragon in the main beam, swallowed in this old well. If you don't believe there's no treasure in the beam and want to know what a Yin Dragon is, I can pull it up for you to see." The village chief's voice was icy. As soon as he finished speaking, several strong young men from his lineage immediately took iron hooks and pulled up the thing that Victor and his son had split, revealing the Yin Dragon from the well. Aster, standing beside them, immediately turned pale. Ruby also looked terrified. The so-called Yin Dragon was wrapped in pine resin, which had mostly decayed over the years. Even the red cloth covering it was tattered. When it was pulled from the well, it was still dripping wet. They dragged it out, casually threw it to the ground, then vigorously pulled it with iron hooks, immediately tearing open the old, tattered red cloth. Water flowed out, and small, dark gray bone fragments drifted with the water from the red cloth, falling to the ground, emitting a cold, dim light. Because the red cloth had been trampled many times, the bones were shattered, making it impossible to discern their original shape. This is the Yin Dragon that the great village chief and clan elder personally created to protect the thriving ancestral hall. The clan elder's voice was frigid. He picked up a bone fragment, dropped it into the well, and said coldly, "Bones and flesh rot, wax remains entombed, Yin Dragon coils above, granaries full." Daughters of the clan, for generations, will be offered and bowed to. Today, everyone is here, so let's vote. If even one person opposes using the Yin Dragon to coil the main beam, our clan will absolutely not do it again. As soon as he finished speaking, the ancestral hall fell silent. The clan elder and village chief swept their eyes around, a smile gradually appearing on their faces. The village chief continued in a low voice, "The Yin Dragon just left the main beam last night, and 2 people have already died at the sand quarry today. Even though the matter has been handled, what if another industrial accident occurs? The sand quarry will be shut down, and if something happens at the mine will also be closed. To protect this year's profits, or rather, to protect the interests of both the mine and the sand quarry, we must quickly return the Yin Dragon to the main beam. The clan elder and I are both old now. The clan's affairs will rely on you in the future. If you want to pass down the custom of the Yin Dragon coiling the main beam, someone must know how to do it. Seize this opportunity, everyone, to collectively create the Yin Dragon. Watch closely, learn thoroughly, so that later you won't say the clan elder and I hoard clan secrets." The village chief suddenly pointed towards the dark room, where his wife led people carrying out a ridge beam with its middle section hollowed out, along with another red cloth stained with pine resin. I was tightly bound, looking at those things, then at the villagers bowing their heads in silence, and the cold smiles on the faces of the village chief and clan elder. In that instant, I immediately understood their intention. This was the age of law. The story of the Yin Dragon Coiling Peak had already spread as a children's rhyme everywhere. The village was also full of cinnabar geckos. If just one person spoke out, this matter couldn't be kept secret. They wanted to drag the entire village down, each person with a stick to smash bones and flesh, so the entire village would collectively create the Yin Dragon. And Ruby stood by, giggling, pretending to be mad. I had just escaped death once and had said those words. The village chief and clan elder would certainly not let me off. Now I was the first one chosen to be the Yin Dragon. The village chief and clan elder exchanged glances, first using the torn red cloth that had previously wrapped Ruby to wrap me. They were probably afraid that too many people would strike later, and if the cloth was broken, they would need another layer to prevent blood from splattering. The village chief said coldly to me, "Yin Dragon Coiling Peak, there has only ever been one Yin Dragon. Choosing 2 people to receive the beam is just a precaution to prevent accidents. After all, 2 people are needed to carry the beam down. Moreover, if you hadn't foolishly thought yourself clever and tried to save Ruby, you could have escaped. Once you had escaped, we would only have turned Ruby into the Yin Dragon. This is your own doing, seeking death." As the village chief spoke, he pulled the red cloth, gradually wrapping my legs. His words sounded so easy on the ears, but even if I hadn't tried to escape, they wouldn't have spared me. I looked at Ruby, still pretending to be mad and giggling, then at my mother. She still stood next to Ruby's mother, her face looking somewhat vague. And the other villagers, they all bowed their heads, as if still considering whether to act. Suddenly, I tightened my waist, raised both legs, and kicked the village chief hard, simultaneously pressing hard on the snake scale in my palm, calling "Azure" deep in my heart. Then I turned and plunged straight into the well. Azure had said he wanted to go down the old well to retrieve his belongings. This time, I jumped into the well, also to find him. If he couldn't save me, at least I wouldn't let the village chief and his cronies achieve their goal of turning me into a Yin Dragon. Even if I died, I would choose my own way of dying. Wasn't Ruby an ungrateful wretch? Didn't she want me to take her place as the Yin Dragon? If I jumped into the well, then she would be the one to become the Yin Dragon. At the bottom of the well was still the beam that Ruby and I had received. I plunged headfirst, and just as I was about to hit the beam, something coiled up from the deep water in the well. The beam swayed with the water, and immediately after, I fell straight into the water. As soon as my hands touched the water, I felt my waist tighten. A blue-scaled snake tail, like a willow branch, wrapped around me, pulling me deeper. This tail was as thick as a human calf, but I knew it was Azure, so I wasn't too scared. I quickly held my breath, letting my body be pulled down by the snake's tail. The well mouth was narrow, the water deep and icy cold. I couldn't see anything. But after not moving for long, the snake tail tightly wrapped around my waist suddenly loosened. Immediately after, I fell into a warm embrace. At the bottom of the well, pitch black, I couldn't see anything, only feeling the snake tail as thick as a thigh coiling around me. Yet I felt no fear at all. I wasn't afraid of this giant snake, nor of this deep old well, filled with cinnabar geckos and the wronged souls of yin dragons buried for generations. What I truly feared were the villagers above, those who had only recently laughed and chatted with me. However, the water at the bottom of the well was too deep. I held my breath for a while but couldn't bear it anymore. Only the buzzing of water pressure remained in my ears. Seeing myself about to drown, I quickly reached out and pushed Azure, signaling him to take me up to breathe. A hand rested on my waist, then moved slowly along my spine to the back of my head. Immediately after, my lips suddenly felt cold, and a stream of air filled my mouth. At this moment, I had no mind for improper thoughts. I just greedily took 2 gulps of air, then continued to hold my breath, not moving. He seemed surprised that I was so compliant. Azure's chest gently vibrated, letting out 2 soft chuckles. He was waiting for something, continuously giving me 5 gulps of air. When I felt the bottom of the well getting darker and darker, he brought me to the surface. It was then I realized the village chief and his cronies had sealed the well again. In the dark well, the rustling of cinnabar geckos echoed again, but at this point I was no longer afraid of them. After all, I had almost been turned into their food. Azure took a stone from his pocket, emitting a faint glow, and shone it on the well wall. As soon as the light flashed, the cinnabar geckos seemed scared and immediately dove to the bottom of the water. He held me with one arm, while with the other, he held the glowing stone, slowly examining the well wall as if searching for something. This old well was covered in green moss, so much so that the original color of the well-building stones was no longer recognizable. Azure swept away the thick layers of moss several times with his snake tail, seemingly looking for something on the well wall. Seeing him busy with both hands, I reached out and clung to a large beam floating vertically in the well, signaling him to let go of me. I lay flat on the beam, at least I wouldn't drown. Unexpectedly, this beam was hollow inside, just wide enough to place my feet on. I rested my chin on the beam's end, feeling quite stable. Azure saw me like this, his lips curved slightly into a faint smile, then he turned and continued searching the well wall. Thinking of how he had continuously saved me, I felt I should repay him somehow. When my breathing stabilized, I spoke up. "What are you looking for?" "Runes," Azure replied, carefully wiping away patches of moss on the well wall. His voice was deep. Yin Dragon Coiling Peak is not a baseless saying. The Shen family has been passed down for centuries. Their descendants are prosperous and wealthy, actually thanks to suppressing the Azure Dragon. Azure Dragon, Shen Chang? I looked down at the emerald willow-like snake tail in the water and immediately understood the meaning of his name. Azure Dragon is the green dragon of the east, corresponding to the 7 constellations of the east. When the stars move and heavenly and earthly energies converge, corresponding things will be born. For example, the Grand Duke Jupiter Tai Sui is born from the movement of the Tai Sui star. The Azure Dragon is also like this. When the 7 eastern constellations move to a certain position, the Azure Dragon will be born there, also called the Azure Dragon. This dragon protects a region, bringing timely rain, favorable winds, and abundant harvests. In the past, enlightened individuals could calculate the position of the Grand Duke Jupiter based on stars, feng shui, and physiognomy. Naturally, they could also deduce where the Azure Dragon would appear. Seeing that I seemed to understand, Azure gave a bitter smile. This old well is a standing burial form, no different from a nail driven firmly into me, a dragon undergoing transformation. For generations, the Shen family buried wooden beams hiding yin dragons, eventually using this well as a tomb. They used the resentment of Shen daughters, transformed into yin dragons, to enhance the power of the runic array on the well wall, forever binding my true form beneath this bottom. Conversely, my Azure Dragon identity can dispel resentment, contend with the Yin Dragon, and help the Shen family borrow the power of the Azure Dragon for their descendants to prosper for generations. Azure slowly stroked the well wall, his voice deep. After 600 years, I finally gathered enough dragon chi to transform into a snake and achieve my cultivation level today. But when I passed the Coppergate trial, I almost died. Fortunately, you helped me. It was because I transformed into a snake and escaped the well that the Yin Dragon lost its restraint, transforming into cinnabar geckos and spreading throughout the village. Azure didn't hide anything, telling me the whole truth. Hearing this, I thought for a moment and understood the entire cause and effect. This old well was normally always sealed. Just as Azure transformed into a snake and emerged, it was also time for the village to replace the old wooden beam with a new one. Therefore, the village chief had opened the well in advance, giving him a chance to escape. Perhaps this was karmic cycle, all predetermined. If the village chief had no intention of suppressing the Yin Dragon anymore, he wouldn't have opened the well. I wouldn't have returned either. Then Azure wouldn't have been able to escape, nor pass the Copper Gate trial. Perhaps his true form would have been forever imprisoned at the bottom of this well. I lay face down on the beam, watching Azure, who had almost wiped clean more than half of the moss on the well wall, but still found no runes. He had been underwater for quite a while. Surely he had searched down there, yet still hadn't found anything. I couldn't help but be curious. What kind of master could have arranged a runic array capable of suppressing even an azure dragon? I reached out and gently disturbed the water, pressing against the well wall, offering to help him wipe away the nearby moss. Unexpectedly, he wiped moss as if dusting, but when I brushed away a layer, my hand, whitened from being soaked in water, brushed past a snake scale he had left in my palm, and fresh blood immediately gushed out. The pain made me let out a soft groan. I intended to break off a piece of wood from the beam to use as a tool for wiping moss, but Azure suddenly turned and looked at me. "Let me do it. If I don't find it, I'll take you out of the village first." His words trailed off, his gaze fixed on the spot where I had just touched the well wall. I curiously followed his gaze and saw individual red blood threads, like tiny snakes, crawling on the well's surface, emitting a faint, blood-colored light. I was startled, immediately pressed hard against the well wall and rubbed again forcefully. Just now, being cut by the snake scale had only drawn a little blood. This time, I rubbed harder, and blood immediately flowed more profusely. The blood stains spreading on the well surface seemed to reveal engraved runes, guiding the blood to crawl like a snake. These were precisely the runes Azure had been searching for all this time. Seeing this, I immediately pressed the wound on my palm, intending to let out more blood. "Don't!" Azure quickly swam over, took my hand, and gently stroked it. The wound on my palm immediately closed. Looking at the blood flowing like tiny snakes along the well wall, he frowned and said in a low voice, "The ancestors of the Shen clan truly understood human hearts." He used the resentment of the Shen daughters, transformed into Yin dragons, to suppress my true dragon chi. He thought I would surely harbor immense hatred for the Shen daughters, and therefore used my dragon scales combined with the Shen daughters' bloodline to activate the runes. "If you hadn't saved me, and I hadn't recognized your kind heart, leaving you a snake scale, if you weren't willing to help me, then these runes would never have appeared." Azure's face was filled with joy. He smiled faintly and said, "It's those village chiefs who hold the clan's economic lifeline, yet don't want to bear the crime of murder. So they set up this array to create Yin dragons at the well's mouth, dragging the entire village into complicity, making you jump down here yourself. This is truly a stroke of fate." He clearly looked excited, staring at me, his eyes full of exhilaration. His gaze followed the red blood, seeing that where the blood flowed, tiny, densely packed runes glowed with an eerie blood-red light, illuminating the entire old well. At the bottom of the well were rotten wood fragments and red cloths soaked in water, submerging and wrapping the Yin dragons. Some cloths were rotted and torn, revealing gray bones that silently cast a cold, dim light under the bloodlight. Even among the still intact red cloths, there were quite a few intact skeletons that hadn't been crushed. Clearly, through generations of creating Yin dragons to prevent unforeseen circumstances, they always prepared two girls to receive the beam. One was made into a Yin dragon, her corpse hidden in the main beam. The other was thrown directly into the deep well to prevent the secret from being revealed. Just as I was looking down, from beneath the red cloth, streams of green light suddenly surged up, dispelling the blood light. At the same time, from within the red cloth, countless cinnabar geckos suddenly sensed something and frantically crawled up, ignoring their fear of Azure. "They're here." Azure embraced me tightly, excitedly watching the green light surge from the bottom of the well. As the pillar of green light shot straight up into the sky, he immediately tightened his embrace, and the snake tail beneath him swung powerfully, breaking through the stone slab, sealing the well mouth and rocketing upwards. The iron chains clanged. My feet touched the ground, and before I could rejoice at escaping death, I heard hurried scratching and rustling sounds. Turning my head, I saw countless cinnabar geckos densely packed on the well wall, crawling out from the bottom of the well like a flood. This number was completely incomparable to the scattered cinnabar geckos in the village before. Yin dragon emerges, geckos scatter, vengeful spirits demand lives, the whole clan perishes. I suddenly remembered Lana's tragic death. So many cinnabar geckos were actually the Shen maidens who had been made into Yin dragons over generations. These girls were deceived by their own families, believing that receiving the beam was an honor, only to end up with their flesh and bones shattered. Buried in the rotting main beams, seeing their clan members celebrating annual rituals, that hatred must have been carved into their bones. I feared this time it would truly be a clan-wide catastrophe. I glanced at the swarm of cinnabar geckos crawling out of the ancestral hall, my heart sinking, but in my mind, the image of the villagers appeared. When they knew the village chief intended to make me a Yin dragon, they all remained silent, even rushing forward to act. In my heart, there was no longer any sorrow or anger. But strangely, those cinnabar geckos didn't pour out of the ancestral hall, but headed directly towards the front courtyard. I suddenly remembered that when the village chief sealed the well, he also dragged the entire village into participating in the creation of the Yin dragon, and I immediately understood something. Azure also gave a cold chuckle, then pulled me to follow the swarm of cinnabar geckos towards the front courtyard. Before we even arrived, we heard the terrified screams of the villagers. More cinnabar geckos are pouring out. Hurry up, quickly create the Yin dragon. Mixed with the screams were dull thudding sounds. In the middle of the crowd, a fresh red Yin dragon was placed in the center. The red cloth wrapping it was thick, and the pine resin coating had been smashed. Streaks of blood seeped through the cracks in the broken resin, resembling a bloody python with cracked scales. And in front of this blood-soaked python, a group of people, men and women alike, held sticks. Hearing that cinnabar geckos were pouring out, they immediately raised their sticks and pounded hard on the red cloth python on the ground. Those behind no longer cared about orderly lines. They either swung their sticks or kicked hard, impatiently asking the village chief, "Is it done yet? Is it done? So many cinnabar geckos are pouring out. Can we bury the Yin dragon in the well immediately?" Azure and I hid in the shadows, silently observing the crowd. Ruby was nowhere to be seen. She had probably already been made into a Yin dragon. Meanwhile, my mother and Ruby's mother were only concerned with using mugwort sticks to ward off the cinnabar geckos pouring out of the well. They clearly knew what a Yin dragon was, yet still ruthlessly participated, just for the annual share of tens of thousands of dollars. Clearly, the cinnabar geckos appearing now could take their lives, but they showed no fear, still frantically trampling the red cloth, striking with all their might. It seemed as if once the Yin dragon was complete, everything would be fine. They could report to the police, they could escape. Why didn't they run? Azure seemed to read my thoughts and chuckled softly. Your clan members, to control them easily, used money to foster uselessness. Daughters don't receive money so that when choosing a beam receiver, parents can ruthlessly sacrifice their daughters. If someone in the clan became successful, it meant someone escaped control, and sooner or later, someone would suspect the Yin dragon clinging to the main beam. As for you, he looked at me, his eyes melancholic, you are the only one of this generation who has left this place. That's why they used money to lure your parents, calling you back. Whether you were made into a Yin dragon or not, you definitely couldn't leave this village again. I stared helplessly as the swarm of cinnabar geckos surged like a flood towards the villagers. Tragic screams echoed everywhere. Suddenly, a thought flashed in my mind. From the beginning, Azure knew there was only one Yin dragon. He understood human nature, yet he still helped me save Ruby. Moreover, his true form was the Azure Dragon, a dragon transformed into a snake, which originally didn't need to pass the Copper Gate trial. From beginning to end, he had gradually led me using that children's rhyme, making me aware of the truth of the Yin dragon. He made me witness Ruby being forced to swallow cinnabar geckos. He kept me there to make me understand that the village chief and clan elder truly wanted to crush my bones to create a Yin dragon. He could have even taken me out of this village in an instant, yet he intentionally let me escape with Ruby. But just then, I coincidentally encountered the plight of Lana and May, causing the villagers to rush and surround the ancestral hall. Perhaps all of this was part of his calculation. He had even anticipated Ruby's betrayal, and that the village chief would seize this opportunity to involve the entire village in creating the Yin dragon. He wanted me to witness the wickedness of the villagers firsthand. He wanted me to hate all of them, so that I would help him. I silently looked at Azure, a strange glint flashing in his eyes. He gave a bitter chuckle. Have you understood everything? So do you want to save them? If you save them today, Even if you explain that the Yin Dragon on the main beam is fake, that I am an escaped azure dragon, they still won't believe you. They will still continue to create Yin Dragons for the annual money share so that their descendants can enjoy life without labor. They will only think that if this Yin Dragon isn't working, then replace it with another or make a few more. Who knows, the benefits might be even greater. Greed leads to death, birds die for bait. What's more, if the ones dying aren't them, what's there to stop them? The two Shen daughters who just dissolved into blood and pus from the gecko poison, that wasn't my doing. It was because they heard that female beam receivers also received money like males. They had once received the cinnabar mark, but it disappeared, so they couldn't be beam receivers anymore. They firmly believed they were still virgins, so they conspired, secretly caught cinnabar geckos, stole the clan elder's cinnabar medicine, and reapplied the cinnabar mark themselves. They thought that with the cinnabar mark on them, based on their clan connections, they could push aside you and Ruby to claim the beam receiver position. That way, they could receive tens of thousands in dividends each year. But you've also seen that the cinnabar mark is actually just something to lure cinnabar geckos into the body. That's why they were the first two to die tragically. Having said this, Azure let go of me, his eyes deep, signaling me to make my own decision. At the front gate, the swarm of cinnabar geckos rushed like a furious tide, engulfing the young men like Aster. They were the first to participate in creating the Yin Dragon, so they were also the first to be covered in cinnabar geckos. The front courtyard immediately descended into chaos. Some screamed, wanting to run straight out. But the village chief roared, "Whoever dares to run will never get a share of the profits again. Quickly throw the Yin Dragon into the well." As soon as his words left his mouth, those who intended to flee hesitated for a moment, then immediately turned back. They ignored the cinnabar geckos scratching and biting them, and paid no mind to their skin, corroded by gecko urine, covered in oozing pustules. They only knew to scream, urging each other to carry the newly created Yin Dragon, rushing towards the old well. I stood in the darkness, watching all these scenes, unable to save anyone. But then my gaze stopped. My mother was pushed around by the crowd, swaying, her hand tightly clutching a burning mugwort stick, wildly waving it in the air, her face filled with horror. My heart trembled slightly. In the end, I couldn't be ruthless. Taking advantage of the chaos, I carefully squeezed through the crowd, got close to her, and tightly grabbed her hand. "Don't make a sound, I'll take you away, mother." Azure had been fighting the Yin Dragons in the well for centuries. Both sides were locked in a stalemate. Now the Yin Dragons had transformed into cinnabar geckos and poured out. This resentment was probably not something Azure could resolve. The only person I could save was my mother. But as soon as I took her hand, she flinched, and then a flicker of joy appeared in her eyes. She mumbled, "Luna, someone at the sand quarry said countless cinnabar geckos crawled up from the river and bit many people to death. At the mine, cinnabar geckos also crawled out. Your father and brother are probably in danger too." I froze. I had never heard this before. Perhaps when I was trapped in the well, the other side had called to inform the village chief and them, but the Shen clan was doomed. Whether at the sand quarry or the mine, they would hardly escape this calamity. "I'll take you out first, mother, then we'll find a way to save them." I glanced at the village chief. He had already led people carrying the bloody Yin Dragon towards the well. There was no time to delay. If I could save one person, I would save one person. The others would be left to fate. After all, she was my own mother. But as soon as I moved, I felt my arm squeezed tight. My mother almost completely leaned her weight on my arm, holding on tightly, not letting go. I turned and met her gaze. She looked at me and whispered, "Luna, don't blame your mother. Even if it's not to save the whole clan, just to save our own family, what's a small sacrifice from you? Afterward, I'll burn joss paper for you every year. I'll take all your share of the profits to buy joss paper and burn it for you." I looked at her. Suddenly, I felt like such a fool. Perhaps it was because I lacked love from childhood that I always craved their attention, which led me to be deceived again and again. Even now, I still held a glimmer of hope, still thinking I could save her. The moment she hit me with those two sticks, I should have given up all hope. My gaze swept over the people carrying the Yin Dragon, frantically warding off cinnabar geckos, rushing towards the old well. Finally, I looked towards Azure, who stood in the shadows. I suddenly found it ironic. He was a snake, yet he understood the treachery of human hearts better than anyone. At that very moment, my mother suddenly shrieked. "Luna has escaped. She's still alive. One Yin Dragon isn't enough to suppress them, so make two. Hurry!" Those carrying the Yin Dragon immediately spun their heads around. A second later, someone shouted, and the crowd immediately split into two groups. One group continued dragging the Yin Dragon to the well, the other rushed straight towards me. Their bodies were still covered in cinnabar geckos, but they seemed to have completely disregarded that now. I looked down at the person still clutching my arm, gave a bitter chuckle, then glanced at Azure in the shadows, giving a faint smile. Just as the villagers were about to close in, a roar, like a dragon's cry, tore through the air. Azure directly transformed into a colossal azure dragon. He thrashed his body and lunged straight towards me. His dragon tail swept across, and my mother was immediately flung far away. Immediately after, with a tight coil, I was wrapped in the dragon's body. Azure soared into the sky. I pressed against his back, looking down. The villagers stood frozen, terrified to move. Just as they knelt in worship, water surged from the old well, spewing out rotten wood fragments, tattered red cloths, tiny dull bone fragments, and countless cinnabar geckos. In a flash, it engulfed the entire ancestral hall. I watched it all motionless, feeling neither joy nor sorrow, just silent. When Azure set me down, I still hadn't fully regained my senses. After a long moment, I softly asked, "Are they all dead?" Azure nodded indifferently. "They've all turned to pus, swept away by the well water. Those at the sand quarry and the mine are no exception. Those who scattered outside will also be sought out by the cinnabar geckos." He paused, his deep eyes looking at me. "Whether they are common geckos or cinnabar geckos, they are always good at crawling out of the darkest, hidden corners. And these cinnabar geckos were originally formed from the resentment of the Shen daughters. Naturally, they can sense the Shen family bloodline. I wanted to ask about my mother, my father, and my brother. But when the image of cinnabar geckos surging from the well, when the figure of Lana melting like an ice cream flashed through my mind, I knew they couldn't have escaped. I just looked at Azure and asked in a low voice, "What about me then?" He took my hand, his finger gently touching the snake scale on my palm. "With me here, they dare not come near you, but I cannot always follow you." I gave a bitter laugh. "Ultimately, I am just someone tied to your fate." Azure looked at me, his eyes gleaming. "Then you must stay by my side forever." He gently touched the scale, and the snake scale in my palm disappeared. He chuckled softly, his eyes sparkling like stars. "Luna, if you leave me, you will perish." My chest suddenly ached, emotions surging within me, unspeakable. So, to keep my life, I had to be bound to him for life. This snake was indeed poisonous, dangerous, and unfathomably deep.